decor or gift ideas for the upcoming holidays? Hello everyone, Miss Carrie here. One of my favorite things to do is show you how to use items you already have in your collection and mix them with new items that I've discovered. Today I'm going to show you how to create this adorable fall garland using stamps, stencils, and sublimation inks from Artesprix. The word sublimation often scares people, so I'm going to keep this super simple and walk you through the project step by step as I explain how to use these inks. Let's take a look at the supplies you will need. For today's fall project, I'm going to use the maple keychain sublimation blanks. These wood cutouts are designed specifically for sublimation ink and the heat required to set the color. I have also selected 4 sublimation ink pad colors, a stamp set from my collection, the matching layering stencils, and some blending brushes. Not only will I be using these items to create my project, I've also gathered the tools needed to heat set the sublimation ink. I have a heat press mat, some protective paper, and heat-resistant tape. I am using the Cricut Easy Press, but you can use another heat source for the project. The tool that you use needs to have a solid heat plate, and it needs to reach a temperature of at least 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Most sublimation products require a higher heat to set. I also recommend a heat-resistant mat to protect your work surface and protective paper. When sublimation inks are heated, they go from a solid to a gas, and some particles can leach out onto your work surface and heating element. This is why it's also important to work in a well-ventilated area. You're going to need heat-resistant tape, and I'll show you how to use that here in a moment. From the Artesprix website, I printed 2 instruction sheets. I love how they provide you with free downloads and instructional videos to help you with your projects. The bag tag instructions include temperature and time requirements, directions for use, and some tips to help you create a finished project. I will be using the ink pads, but Artesprix also has paints and markers that you can use. On each of the instruction sheets are directions for use, some tips, and this one here has how to care for the stamps that you use with the ink pads. One of my favorite things about this worksheet is the before and after chart. Most beginners are often confused that the color of the sublimation ink looks so much different than the finished product. Before heat is applied, most colors are very dull. The heat gives them their vibrancy. This chart is a great representation of that, and it helps me see what the stamp pad ink will look like before and after I heat press it. As I create today's fall project, I'll bring in a few additional supplies. In the description below, you will find a list of those items I'm using and links to these instruction sheets on the Artesprix website. Let's get started with the project. I'm going to begin by stamping my image onto some heavier weight cardstock. I have placed this into a stamping press to help me align the image and restamp the design if needed. I've laid 2 layers of paper onto the platform because sublimation ink can seep through and it will stain. With a pencil, I'm tracing the tags. You want to make sure that you use a pencil for this step because pen and marker ink could transfer to your project. When choosing a stamp, it's best to start with one that's not super detailed. Some sublimation inks will expand a bit and the details will get lost in the heat process. I did not have any issues with the Artesprix inks spreading, so I really want to try a more delicate design on a future project. You also need to remember that your image will be mirrored, so if you're using text, it will be backwards on the project. Artesprix does have a mirror stamp plate designed for text. I do not have that mirror stamp plate, so I can't give you much information on it. Once you've stamped all the images, you will need to clean the stamp right away. Artesprix has developed a cleaner for stamps. I don't have the Artesprix cleaner, so I'm just going to use one that I have. It did leave a little bit of staining, but most of the ink came off, so I'm not worried about it. Now that my ink has sat for about 30 minutes, I'm going to bring in the stencils and add some color to the design. If you're one who already owns layering stencils, you know exactly how these work. Each stencil has little cutouts that are portions of your stamped image. You shade each of these with an ink color of your choice. I'm using a set of blending brushes to apply the ink. If you're going to use brushes like these, you will need to designate them specifically for sublimation ink. They can be washed, but some of the residue will remain, and it could mix in with any standard dye or pigment ink pads you own. I just picked up an inexpensive set online, and they sit in the box with my sublimation products. According to the Artesprix instruction sheet, you can create designs on printer paper. But since I'm adding multiple layers of ink with the stencils, I chose to use a heavier cardstock. This is going to prevent any bleeding and lessen the amount of ink soaking through to the back of the design. Now that my image is shaded, I'm going to cut this out along those pencil lines. You can choose to add this to your project now, or you can set it aside, continue to make a bunch of sublimation stamped images, then heat set them when you're ready. Of course, we're going to heat ours right away, so I've grabbed my heat press and I'm setting the temperatures and time as the instructions say on the worksheet. This will take a moment to heat up. While it does, I'm going to secure the image to my blank. When you're sublimating, you want to protect your work surface and heat plate and secure the image to the blank as tightly as possible. This is where that protective paper and tape come into play. For those who are science nerds like me, here is the reason for all of that. Sublimation is a chemical process that turns a solid into a gas when heat is applied. It skips the liquid state. During this process, the ink turns into tiny particles that embed themselves into the blank. That's what we call those polyblend products. If there's not a tight bond between the blank and your image, those particles will not bond, and you end up with what we call ghosting. That's why I'm attaching this design I created to the blank on all four sides with that heat-resistant tape. Some of the particles might escape and stain your heat plate or work surface. So I have cut 4 layers of the protective paper, and I'm going to sandwich my blank between them. When you're creating this sandwich, make sure that the sublimation ink part of the project is facing up. You want the paper that the ink is on to be touching your heat plate. That's going to create the best transfer of the image. Now I'm going to sit my heat press over the top. I am applying pressure to this to make sure that I have a tight bond between the blank and my paper design. Once the timer goes off, I'm going to remove the heat and let this sit. Don't touch it yet. Not only is it very hot, some of the particles are still settling, and we want everything to bond to our maple blank. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes to cool before you can remove the tape. This is always the best part. Seeing that image come to life is so much fun. Let me try that again. Okay, so I'm going to sit these side by side, and you can really see how there's a change in the color. It's even brighter on lighter colored blanks. All right, now all we have to do is add our beads and tassel. I'm going to string some jute twine through the key ring hole, and then I'll add some orange and white wooden beads in an alternating pattern. You can buy wood beads and paint them, or purchase painted bead assortments on various sites. I cheated a bit and went to the holiday section of my local craft store and purchased a Halloween garland that was 75% off. It had just the right amount of beads and they were the exact color that I needed. I'm adding a ribbon bow above that wooden keychain. This secures the blank and it also creates a little bit of space for those beads to move. To make the tassel, I'm using a loom from We Are Memory Keepers or We Are Makers. You just wrap your twine or floss around the loom, fold the loom in half, and then you're going to secure your tassel at the top by tying a little bit of twine around it. I did add some ribbon, and that's going to sit on the outside of my tassel. With some scissors, I'm going to cut that twine along the bottom here. My scissors fit right in the groove. To remove it, I just have to pop out the metal bar at the top. I did wrap some more twine around the top of the tassel and I trimmed the ends. And then all I have to do is tie it onto the end of my little decoration. Here's what the completed project looks like. I kept mine really small so that I could place it on some stacked trays in my craft room. Feel free to make it as large as you need it. I love how easy it was to stamp these images with the Artesprix inks. They allowed me to use some items that I already own for paper crafting in a new way, and I can't wait to try this again. I hope that you enjoyed learning how to use some of your paper crafting supplies to create some unique fall decor pieces with Artesprix ink pads. This is such a simple project that you can create for just about any holiday. I've added still shots of this fall project to my social media and website for you to use. I want to thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about this project or supplies listed below, feel free to leave me a comment. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.